Hello, everybody. Welcome to HeartMind Happy Hour. I am your host, Holly Copeland, and I am really excited about this afternoon's interview with Lisa Rose. Welcome, Lisa.
Hi, everyone.
Some of you may have heard or seen Lisa gave an interview recently on Back Gap, and she's been a member of HeartMind Alchemy Lab and contributor. And when I listened to the Back Gap interview and heard her story, I was just so unbelievably inspired and excited by all that she was sharing, and her story, which she will begin with and tell of her regeneration process, regenerating her consciousness, as she calls it, that started through a kundalini awakening and 3 years of bliss, and then some backing up to understand really what happened to her, and did develop some kind of key points of what happened. And so much of her story and what she ultimately has been sharing around what happened touches on so many aspects of things at HeartMind Alchemy Lab that many people are interested in, consciousness, meditation, some of the science behind it, the wave mechanics, coherence, heart and brain coherence, pineal gland. There's so much of this all feels to me like it's all kind of comes together in Lisa's story. And so for that reason, I'm just really, really excited to have her share and see where this conversation will unfold. So Lisa, I'm just, again, really excited to have you here.
Hey, yeah, thanks. And all those words you just used there, Holly, I knew none of that terminology. As we were talking right before we came live, I didn't even know what consciousness was. I knew of myself as a sentient being, and I was conscious, but in terms of the fundamental, the substratum of the entire universe, I mean, even just that would have never flowed out of my mouth, prior to this experience. So as I say in my paper, I don't know, on Back Up or whatever, I was a home builder and a golfer and a boater, and that's what I knew. I knew Johnson Motors and, Evan Roods and Merc Cruisers, but I could tell you everything I knew about, Tiger Woods' swing, but, it was, there came a time in my life as I think it comes for a lot of us, right? Especially those who are very not familiar at all with an inner world, which I was not. And so eventually, I guess after 53 years or so, it came knocking on my door in a big way, and got my attention very, very, it was crazy. Things started happening around me that were just outrageous, and I thought, what happened to my boating life? And and then more importantly, I think, was the fuel on the fire, that things were happening to family and friends around me that I was always able to, as we all are able to, we get spun out and we get back up, dust our knees off, and jump back into that game of life, right? But I just couldn't do it, and they kept coming, and I just could not jump back into what I perceived to be that life out there anymore, with everything that was going on around me. And that's just a setup, okay? Yep. And there are things that will happen in our environment, in our surroundings, if it's not illness, it's other things that it's your higher self. I've learned, trying to get your attention. I wasn't paying attention because I didn't know about a higher self, so they just kept mounting, right? Yeah. So finally I just said, what the heck? And I really did. I was talking to somebody, she actually happened to be a coach. I saw her on Facebook, and she posted something. I don't know, I called her up, and she says, what do you really want, Lisa? I'm like, I want to know God, and I want to know God now. She's like, whoa, that's pretty much how it happened. And I was quite serious about it. And I tell you what, it was a pretty emphatic surrender at that time. I didn't know that is a form of surrender, when you finally just say, I've had enough. of whatever it is. You know, it's got to change. It just stops right here. And I was that emphatic about it. And we'll speak to that a little bit, a little further down the road about the power of intention.
Yeah.
How vital that is, right? But you know, to the experience, out real quick, because a lot of folks probably heard it on the Buddha at the back, Buddha at the gas pump. That's back gap. Buddha at the gas pump interview. Rick was so open and receptive to giving me the microphone to tell things. But I went into, I was led the whole way. I didn't know what being led meant, but there is a higher power out there. It is called higher self, higher consciousness. And I knew nothing about it until I was kind of in the midst of it. And I'm like, how did I get from boating on the lake all day to sitting and staring at walls for 24 hours? And I was comfortable with it. The things that I was reading, I was Mind's Silent Partner, a pamphlet that I was led to after studying a little bit about mind science, meditative science, anywhere my mind would take me, because I was so willing to go to places that it had never gone before. So you guys can appreciate for somebody who never known anything about meditation or mind science, right? And I was glued to it, right? It is very therapeutic. And just studying it was very therapeutic for me. And it led me to Mind's Silent Partner, which actually is we're contemplating the metaphysical the gospel of Jesus. He was James Porter Mills was taking the Bible and breaking some of the more popular storylines, parables, into a metaphysical perspective, and he used the word consciousness, and I didn't know about God as consciousness with a big C, right? It didn't compute with me. It took me almost 3 weeks to get through the first chapter. That's how unfamiliar I was with this whole area, right?
Can I ask, did you grow up in a religious household at all, or what was your?
I went to mass as a child on Sunday mornings until age 13, and then that was it. That was it. Yeah.
I would say typical for a lot of, sort of in American culture anyway.
That is true. That is true. I did know that if I wanted to know God, that eventually I always felt that I had heard that everything could be found in the Bible, but it was Greek to me. It was Greek to me, but in a roundabout way, the way I'll say higher self was leading me, I eventually got to 1, 2, 3 interpretations of the Bible, Mind's Silent Partner being one of them. So it kind of circled me back around, because that's what I felt was, I guess the Christian thing to do, to find all the answers to life in a Bible. It was an interesting journey. But so I'm reading the contemplative material, right? And I say contemplation. I didn't know anything about meditation, and I wasn't feeling well with everything still going on around me and the pressure of things building up, things we still have to take care of in the world. And there was no way I could have meditated like you all meditate. All I could do was stare at a wall. Of course, higher self knows this. It's not going to lead me to you guys and go into meditative practice.
Well, I would argue that staring at a wall is a form of meditation, Lisa, whether you call it contemplation and we call it meditation.
I agree, but meditation can take you places you well know in consciousness, right? I was virtually staring at a wall.
Apparently did.
Well, it was working on my consciousness. I didn't know it, right? Okay. But all I knew is that when I continued to contemplate the passages, right, and take them in, I could actually, honestly, and you guys can appreciate this, feel shifts in my brain. I could feel things happening and working, and it felt wonderful. And I would always want to come back to reading Mind's Silent Partner. I began calling it my Bible. right? And I could go and read that thing and take it in and stare at a wall for hours. You know, my husband was like, what are you doing? I'm like, I don't know, you know, I just want to do this, you know, it feels really good. And having no idea really. Yeah, the word regeneration is mentioned 19 times in there. I didn't know what to expect. I really did not. Okay. So, but along the way, it took about 2.5 years, 2.5 years. Along the way, I think probably about 6 or 9 months prior to the experience, I kept hearing and seeing everywhere, as you well know, right? You've experienced where you start getting messages, the same message over and over again. I kept hearing the word, if you really want something, persist 24/7, 24/7. I don't know how many times I heard that. I'm like, all right, I'm already doing it every moment I can, right? So I just bore down and gave it everything I had, virtually. No more golf outings, no more whatever. And
did your husband think that you'd kind of lost your mind? I mean, I'm just kind of curious.
No.
You
I
have
tell you,
a saint for a husband.
I tell you, and I mentioned this to Rick too. It's over at Backup that. Again, I'm going to go back to the higher self. That higher consciousness works everything out. And I say it in my paper, it's as if everything unfolded for me. When you are totally surrendered, you're not in charge of anything. And there's an environment then that begins to build up around you to protect what I say is all of God's creatures, right? To protect the creation, right? To help bring about its fruit. I swear, you know, there were things that would happen anyhow. It's just unbelievable when you're totally surrendered. What happens? What higher consciousness is able to do? Move mountains, right? Is able to move mountains for you. Well, so, oh gosh. Let's see. Here we go.
You're staring at walls and
yeah. So I'm trying to figure out how I can do 24/7, right?
Yeah.
I mean, not really, because it just falls in your lap. I decided, here comes along the way, I'd learned the art of surrender as put forth by Ramana Maharshi, right? Mm-hmm. And then I decided to go ahead because I knew nothing about. I couldn't even say his name. It was kind of Indianish to me, so it was so funny. I was like, what? Or the word kundalini, you know, I could not even say the words, but I decided to go ahead and learn about Ramana Maharshi's life in a 6-week course. And day 8 of that course is I'm sitting down to do my homework. And that's when the experience happened. And so I'm sitting there and I'm looking and I can barely even think anymore. There was pressure that was rising up in my head as a result of my heavy contemplation. And it's this, I use the word kundalini because people are somewhat familiar with it in this family of ours, right? But it's the life force energy, and it was rising up. It was rising up, and it was like putting a lot of pressure on my head, and I could barely even read the first few paragraphs what was going on in this book. So I pick up the book, right, to do my homework for the night, and I'm just so upset at Ramana because, you know, we were on day 8 of his life, and we were learning that as a young boy, he would be found in the gutter, right, with bugs all over him, and people would have to take care of him. And I picked up the book and I said, Ramana, how could you do this to yourself? And I tossed the book across the bed. You know, how could you let your young body go? I'm a mess, right? And it was funny that, so I tossed the book across the bed, and that's when it happened. I was sitting on the bed with my legs stretched out, and then there was this flash sensation that came over me that I say, you know, it was like every cell of my body stood at attention as if meeting its maker. And that's true. It was the most incredible sensation ever, just a flash, right? And then my eyes clamped shut by themselves. I did not do it. I'm not in charge here. And then something slid back in the middle of my head, and this energy I say energy, I don't know, my eyes were clamped shut. You know that ending scene of Raiders of the Lost Ark?
Yes, I do. I'm a child of the
They open
80s.
the box and all that stuff, because something like that. So you have to close your eyes, I guess. But part of the process, and yeah, so energy starts pouring through the crown of my head, and I mean gushing through, and then a light body image of Ramana came, and we had some telepathic discussion. I go into a little bit of detail in the back gap interview about that, because I could talk all day about that. There's some hilarious moments, right? But it was very interesting, and I mean, very interesting. And then after about 3 minutes, the image faded, and about another 10 or 12 minutes of continued energy gushing out of my head. So that gets us rolling on the experience. I didn't feel anything afterwards. I mean, I still had the pressure in my head for another 3 months, and it was a wonderful experience, but not knowing anything about a spiritual awakening or kundalini or anything, I was like, okay, so where's God? It's just like, is Ramana God? I was like, well, is he going to come back? So I didn't know anything. And one of the things that Ramana, I was told before that the image faded was to stay inside. And I did take that very seriously. I didn't go to the internet and learn about anything. I didn't research anything. I didn't talk too much about anything. And that's a good, there was this period of bliss that came that was just chock full of gorgeous, I call them treasures of heaven, which I found to be I think it's just part of what I'll call the regeneration process, regenerating your consciousness. It was removing from my consciousness, from my belief system, everything that is untrue about humanity, all the false beliefs and error patterns and constructs. And as that was happening during this bliss period, I think that's what it's for. It's protecting the newly liberated consciousness from all of that worldly stuff, right? That man-made stuff, that the story that we're telling ourselves, as it's working through and removing all of that from my consciousness. And, at times I would look around and, just start laughing at what I would see on TV. It's like, what's going on here? There's a president is doing what? It just got to be almost like a circus at times. And when I looked out upon the world and to realize that I had bought into all of that all this time. So, the stories that we're telling ourselves, right, and all of humanity for eons. So we've been allowing ourselves to, I'll just say, not be so liberated. So it's
right, to buy into objective reality, that is somehow
important. Yeah. Right? So it's been kind of interesting that, the 3 years I wasn't going to, number one, I wasn't going to disobey, but it just made sense why there's this huge period of bliss. And I've described that, I think, a number of times on the HeartMind Facebook page, many times. And I do believe that there's a huge difference. And I think the Sanskrit term is the Satchitananda. Mm-hmm. Right. And that is
yep.
that is the newly regenerated consciousness. It goes beyond any sort of emotion. I had no negative or positive emotions all day long as things were working through me, as the consciousness was being regenerated. So it was quite an interesting 3 years. As I say in my paper, I wish this upon everybody. It's the most glorious thing ever to know that there's a beautiful, powerful, omniscient, omnipresent, those words, they are used in Christian, circles, but it is true, the all-knowing, all-present, right? And of course, all-loving. Oh my gosh, there were sensations that came through, even through the bliss period, right? That I've never felt before in my life. They're just so loving, intelligent, and loving, and embracing. I would wish it upon every member of the human race. It was that extraordinary, and the shifts continue. Not shifts. It's the expansion of the consciousness continues to every day. There's just a little bit more. It's just really cool. It's just really cool.
Oh, thank you. There's so many questions I could ask. The one that comes to mind is, you said after this major, this period, this kundalini experience, which it sounds like it lasted for maybe 15 minutes.
Yep.
The full, yeah. You said you came out of that, and if I understood, you said, "Where's God?"
Well, yeah, kind of. After, yeah.
Right. And so I'm curious, then you went into this period of bliss with, this sort of non-emotional state and this loving presence. Did you have this innate knowing then at that point that was indeed God within? What was there tell me about that.
No, I didn't know where we can end. That's a really good question, Holly. I've never even contemplated that, never thought about that. But during the bliss period, when I realized that I was feeling very different, right, and very elated and blissful and detached is the word, right, from the world, I was willing to ride that wave, I call it, to wherever it was going to take me. No, I didn't equate it to a God consciousness. I was just in bliss. I didn't even realize until maybe, I began, like I said, passing by the TV and start laughing maybe, at certain things that were going on in the world. I did not know really that I didn't know, because I wasn't researching anything, and I hadn't up to the point. I was willing to ride the wave. Heck, I could have been a flying unicorn.
Right, but that question, like, I want to know God, right? Which was your fervent question. Did that question enter your mind stream, or it just didn't even enter your mind stream because
nope, not what the bliss.
Yeah,
didn't realize at all. I had no idea. And when the bliss started to subside is when I began to realize, and I was not happy when the bliss started to subside. But I began to realize why it might, because along with everything that was happening within the consciousness, the clearing out, right, was a lot of wisdom. And then I realized all I had to do was ask questions, right? And then the wisdom would pop up if I'm staring at a wall, or maybe after some contemplation. And I did learn a little bit about meditation, right? And answers would come sometimes almost instantly with questions. And I then but it happened after the bliss was subsiding that I noticed these things, and I began to realize that there was a power here that was answering to my every call, my every need, and it was really comforting, really comforting. Still to this day, it's still there. It's still there. It's lovely. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it is true. Asking, you shall receive. I never knew it would become like that, but it's like, whoa, but it is true. It is true. So.
Wow.
Yeah. I after the 3 years, again, on the downslide of it, I began to realize that, I could have stayed in bliss. I wasn't in charge of the process, right? And that there's a reason why the bliss subsides, so we can come back into the world and do what we're supposed to be doing, right? And what I've learned as a result is of the experience that our higher self is here at all times, right? We can engage with it at all times. We don't really even have to go into meditation to engage with it. It's here at all times. And, you know, especially in emergencies, right? And that I don't do anything anymore if somebody waves money or opportunities in the world. We don't go there. There's nothing that attracts me in that regard anymore. I do things on inspiration now, and when I'm inspired to join, you know, the HeartMind group, I'm inspired. I go. I was inspired to write the paper. Very inspired. I don't know. I'm 4.5 years past the experience, and I receive inspiration to write the paper. So I sit down and I write the paper. In addition, I was inspired to look into the science side. I'm like, yeah, that'd be a good idea. You just the inspiration, not knowing anything about physics. I mean, even the word gave me shudders, right? But I pursued it. Thanks, Jason, if you're out there. Jason Romero, help me. With the fractal physics that are involved with a lot of experiences in consciousness, and again, it's a different way of living, abiding by the spirit in all moments.
Right.
I'm not rushing. I stopped rushing to doctors. I used to all the time. I haven't seen a doctor in 6 years, barring one incident. Medications, threw those away. I abide in the spirit in all moments, at all times. It's a reason why I don't monitor brain waves. Number one, I don't know if I would like what I see. It's just, I think I'm different. It's just like, I can't explain it. I just don't think that my brain waves would fit the patterns, right? and they definitely wouldn't have in the bliss period.
Well, I think people would like to have your brainwave patterns, to be honest.
Well, that is one thing. We had a little conversation going on our Facebook group page about it's another part of the effects of having the consciousness kind of cleansed, right? I don't have any concerns about the world, that draws my attention. So all of my moments throughout the day are pretty much inward focused. I laugh sometimes. Yeah, I still have to make dinner, but I tell you, there's not a TV going on in the background. There's really nothing going on in my mind. A lot of times I'll intentionally just go, I am, right? And it's very therapeutic for me, and for anyone, really. Yeah.
I mean, this inward focus that you talk about, and a few things that you say just really highlight, and what I hear you saying is, so you made a statement in Back Gap of, you said, there is no bridge between here and here. We are it. We are all that is. We are sovereign beings. And as I hear you speak, what I hear is this shift, this intrinsic shift from living from a space of my will to living to divine will, this grand surrender of your being to a higher calling and a higher purpose, but one that's not forced, one that just like you've just gently given over, and it just is or manifests through you. Is that correct?
Boy, that was pretty eloquent. That was really eloquent. Yes, I would agree with that 100%, and multiply that times 1,000, because it is life as it is meant to be lived, with the mind and heart unencumbered, free to be, what do you say, fulfilled fulfilled by life itself. It's the most gorgeous thing ever. I had no idea this kind of existence was available to each and every single one of us. It's extraordinary to have the higher and it's infinite. Everywhere I turn, it's like, oh my gosh, I can do that. Really? You know, a lot of it's internal, right?
Right.
But I've explored lots of the psychic things that we have available to us, right? Even without awakenings, I say, you know, but I didn't know any of this, and so to go and explore things that we can do with what do I call it, the omnipresent nature of consciousness.
Right.
I've had some minor success, right? I can't say that I'm. I teased somebody the other day that I was, you know, remote viewing the mountains out the window and I was bored, right? I had to sit. I'm out there really just surfing across the mountains, but it's the endless possibilities for humanity within the realms I think of our body, mind, organism seem to me just to be just endless opportunities for us as humanity to be able to heal ourselves, to have, I mean, how do you think scientists receive their knowledge? They're receiving it direct from source. Everybody can do that. You know, you're just putting your mind to it. You're drawing up the omniscience of the universe. Everybody can do that. Yeah, we have this, what I call direct knowing. Self-healing is so important. It's such an important thing right now. And that's kind of where I'm headed. I'll speak to that in just a little bit as well. But yeah, Holly, it's a ride, I think, that won't end. You know, it won't end. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and, you know, of course, it's like what you're saying is I'm aligning with my infinite potential. I'm aligning with divine will, which is infinite, which is boundless. And so when we align with that which is infinite, then everything, lo and behold, is infinite.
Yeah.
There are infinite possibilities.
Yeah. Yeah. And one of the cool things too, I'm learning, I'm just really having fun with this, is the oneness. And, you know, this unity consciousness is the way I experience it is when I'm working with people now, and I'm working with physicists and scientists with a lot of fancy titles and names and, you know, lots of worldly knowledge. No, each of them is a creation of God. And, you know, I just remove all of that stuff and start working with people one-on-one, as you're used to as a coach, right? Working with them on the God level, right? I'll say the soul level, where you're speaking in terms of just existence and to be able to lift ourselves up and help each other, regardless of who's signing the paycheck and what the agenda is. And it doesn't matter to me. You know, I'm working with some pretty interesting folks now, and, you know, we to be able to speak on a level, whereas before I would have said, oh my God, I'll never make my way into that organization, or, you know, because it's the
Yeah.
The unity consciousness. That's all I can say. There's no barriers. There are no barriers. We're all one. Yeah.
There are no barriers. We're all one. And when we recognize that, then we connect with each other at that level of consciousness.
Yeah.
Consciousness interacting with consciousness. And so we, you know, are fundamentally not identifying with anybody's role anymore, anybody's, you know, any of the external things that the kind of material world cares about, because we recognize we're all fundamentally wise and good and loving and eternal and infinite. And when we connect heart to heart at that level, right, then yes, it's just such a beautiful way of living life. It really is. Yeah. So things you know, we thought maybe we'd go through the paper real quick, because it was such an inspiration. Sometimes I look back and read, I'm like, who wrote this?
That's another thing that's true. When you get the inspiration and you sit down and start writing, you look back 3 months later, even 3 weeks, I'm like, where did all this come from?
Right. Well, maybe what I'll do, because I would love for you to talk about the paper and talk about your sort of 6. So folks, Lisa has kind of 6 main points for awakening according to this regeneration process she was following. And she talks about those in her paper. And I'm going to just read something that really highlighted from me that you wrote. You said, waves of pure principle are pregnant with symmetry and will weave a perfect golden mean ratio nesting pattern given the proper environment which I was allowing for since I was completely surrendered. Had there been any resistance from my thinking mind, there would have been a totally different outcome from me. And I love that because this is not about thinking mind. So the waves were completely free to embed due to total surrender. Surrender is an art, really. It cannot be taught. It comes from within as wisdom by this loving, intelligent, life-vitalizing source of all that is.
Isn't that gorgeous? That's right in the middle of Dan's science, I think, right? And that was the only paragraph that I wrote. And I'm looking back, I'm like, wow. And that's true. It's so true.
So beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. It's just flowed right out, and some of the other stuff. Who wrote that? But it's
You did.
It's that creative part of the consciousness. It just starts flowing. I received inspiration to write this paper. Now I see why. I've let this paper go to numerous science foundations, and I just trust that my message is being heard. We'll just put it like that. I trust my message is being heard. I'm getting inspiration. I'm not the one running the show here. I mean, there are lots of folks in our group here who understand the nature of higher consciousness. If we let it flow through, we're not the doer. We just do what we're kind of inspired to do. People say what I'm told to do. I'm like, no, well, yeah, but it's inspiration. And if I don't move on inspiration, I start feeling bad. So I get on it. And there's reason for it. And I may not be able to see it right away or see the results of it, but somebody is being impacted by these words, right? And it was necessary because I was inspired to write it in a scientific mind and start sending it, with a science-minded person, okay, as the audience to read the paper and start sending it to science organizations, science foundations primarily. Why? I don't know.
That's what consciousness wants to do.
Right. Exactly. Exactly. So I do the abiding, I say, and it's fun. Oh my gosh, I haven't written anything in a long time. So yeah, the 6 steps, they're real quick because we go into them detail. And yeah, because again, this is after the Bliss, and after I researched kundalini for almost a year, because people were telling me I had a kundalini experience. I'm like, well, what's that? What's spiritual awakening? What is going on here? Right. And in the middle of the Bliss, I didn't care. But, afterwards, and I spoke with some highly experienced professionals about kundalini, from the therapist side to the science side. And I kept thinking, okay, I can see things from that lens. I said, but that's not what I was doing. I set the intention to know God, but I was following James Porter Mills's method of regenerating our consciousness, right? Surrender, your body, mind, organism, right? Mm-hmm. So, I went back to James Porter Mills and I started looking, it's like, well, they can call it what they want. The world's going to call it what they want, right? But I'm terming it regeneration, because the early 2020, during our time we had to go sit at the house, I saw an online conference, and I swear I think somebody in our group posted it, Brandy. Mm-hmm. I think Randy actually put, yeah, he was supposed to go to the University of Arizona, the conference, and it was entitled Consciousness Reboot. And I'm like, well, that's the word I've used a lot because I used to be a computer programmer in my early days. And I would say, you know, to myself, like, I rebooted my consciousness. You know, I rebooted my consciousness. So when I saw that posted, and Randy and a couple of other people were going to do the online conference, I started, that was the signal. Thanks, Randy. The remembrance that said, you regenerated your consciousness. And I began to research, and I'm like, yeah, I did. It was wonderful. And I'll tell you where that's leading in just a few minutes. Yeah. How are we doing on time?
We're doing great. It's quarter till 6.
Yeah. So the first, I would eliminate for this group the first step, right, which is to update your science, because I think you guys get it.
Right? Yeah, and who knows who will listen to this, to this talk. We don't know where it will go. So I think it's a really important point, though, and I'm really glad that you brought it up because, I mean, I have kids who are in school right now who are still learning the same old Newtonian physics.
Oh my gosh, no way, still?
No way, yes.
Oh, man, I tell you. Okay, then we'll say it. Update your science. Number one, right. And not what they're teaching you in even college. Well, maybe college. They get to a little. No, I don't know.
I don't think Bruce Lipton and Joe Dispenza, and I don't think they're necessarily getting that kind of Nassim.
All right, stay away from college. Yeah. Update your science and start looking at the science of consciousness at the very minimum, right? The Morphic Field, you mentioned Morphic Field and
Rupert Sheldrake. Rupert Sheldrake was on a talk at IONS today that I listened to. He is so fantastic, and he is writing. I just want to put a plug for his books, Presence of the Past, and he has another one on science that I'm forgetting the title, but he's
he has 1,000 books, right?
Yeah, and so many people, Eileen McCusick, who talks about morphic fields and biofield resonance.
It really opens your mind up. Especially, with the last thing you heard anything about chemistry or biology, right, was when you were 18 and you've forgotten everything since. So it's not difficult stuff. It really isn't. And in fact, it's because it's the fundamental nature of the universe, the way I see it now, right? It is you. So you're kind of reading about yourself.
Right. And can I summarize an important point that I heard you talk about in the Buddha Gas Pump interview, which is this flip. I think the key for me, and I'd love to hear your perspective, is this flip from we live in a matter-centric universe where consciousness resides in our brain as matter. Somehow the brain creates consciousness, to all there is consciousness, and we're 99.9% plasma and ether, and consciousness is all there is. And this matter, yes, it exists, but it is, consciousness is the fundamental fabric of the universe.
Yes.
Not something else. Do you agree that that's?
Yes. Oh, yes. That was in James Porter Mills's. That was his essential premise. That's why I felt so, when I first, in 1920, right, 1920, and probably even before, well, obviously before that, but, when he started using that big capital C, it started to make sense to me. And he was saying things that the quantum physicists back then were saying, right? But nobody heard about quantum physics until 100 years later. Well, they did know about it, but it was never brought to the public, I think, especially in the light that it is being, viewed now. And so, yes, updating your science, the science of consciousness. We don't have to really go into quantum physics, but it's kind of there's some marriage there. I mean, even just all I ever did was read some of Greg Braden and Bruce Lipton stuff. And you get enough just from some of the more popular, mainstream authors who speak quite well and on a very general nature about the science of consciousness, a little bit about quantum physics, and because nobody really can speak about quantum physics. I mean, I can't, but I could understand at least a little bit what they were saying, and that the fractal physics are even newer, and those are the physics that I applied to the experience itself. Because you got to wonder. So we have this fabric called consciousness, right? Which really science hasn't really put a definition to it. they still can't, right? But when you start thinking about it, okay, so things exist, but how is anything happening at all? You ever sit and wonder about that?
Yes, I do. I do
okay,
sit and wonder about that.
I mean, even just raising my hand like this, how is anything happening at all? Well, we go on and on about all that, but yeah. the key is to at least embrace it in your heart, right? That yes, that consciousness is what we call primordial, substratum of everything that's happening everywhere, right? And that everything that we experience, we're experiencing it within consciousness, and I can't deny that. I cannot deny that. So being primordial, it really does flip things around. It puts consciousness right at the base of all experience, of all matter,
right?
Living, non-living, whatever. So yeah, update your science, and then. And
I want to give a plug here. I don't know if you've experienced any of Rupert Spira's teachings or not. He's a non-dual teacher.
I've seen some of his videos. Yeah.
Yeah, and he will talk about this, this fundamental point of how we're being held back by this belief that matter is primary. And, and I love the way he says, look, I'm not asking you this is not a belief you have to believe in. Tell me if this isn't the center of your experience. Have you ever, in your entire experience, has anyone ever known anything outside of the knowing of anything?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Yeah, it's undeniable. What are people going to say? So I just accepted that. Yeah, I just accepted that as premise, and it's amazing what happens when you just accept that as a premise, and everything starts to right itself. That's why James Porter Mills is right up front. He's like, consciousness is primordial. Yeah, he doesn't really say it, but I mean, he does, but it's right up front in his book. And if we just make that assumption, then everything is going to right itself. Yeah.
It's like everything falls into place when you take that, it's like a quantum flip in worldview. And when you make that flip, it's like, oh, I get it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Dummy, so,
okay, great. So that's number one. And then the next one is set your intention.
That's your intention. This works, I say in my paper, whether you want to know God, however you want to phrase it in terms of regeneration, just say regenerate. You regenerate my consciousness. I want to embody only truth. Oh my God. That's exciting. Things that come to me when I contemplate eternal life. It's just phenomenal. Is working those with the neural connections, and I could sit under a tree still for an hour and contemplate eternal life. To me it's like a little high.
Okay, Lisa, I just had a brainstorm idea. I think we should run a workshop together, and we can
just sit around and be blissed out. Yeah.
Yeah.
I tell you, to me, it's because you're scanning your own horizon, right? The endless horizon, I say, and because the word eternity, the mind doesn't know where to go with that, but consciousness does. And so your mind is being silenced, right? And
thinking mind,
consciousness is working. It is. It's working, and I can feel results little by little, still almost every day. Right. Okay, so, but set your intention.
So important to have. I mean, intention is so fundamental.
Well, you are your higher self. So aim high.
Are that, right?
You are that. So aim high. You want to embody higher consciousness? Say that. Say that. Mean it. It's worth it.
I really, I get chills when you say that. I want to embody higher consciousness. Imagine what a world it would be like if everybody had that as their intention.
I know. Put the remote control down. It's all right here. You are that. Aim high.
I love it. You
high, the utmost high, the highest of high, the highest of high. I think I asked you something about that in a post. Do you aim the highest of high? When you go into, when you do your meditations, that's all I do. I aim the highest of high. When I'm contemplating, give me the highest life, give me the highest you could possibly give me. I've got all day.
Okay, I love it. And then
really big, this next step, I think, is what really was the game changer for me, at least. But I think in regeneration, it's very important, because you're going from normal human race consciousness, and the quicker that we can get through the regeneration process with full surrender. We'll say that too, okay?
Yeah, that's coming. That's number 4.
Yeah, that's number 4, right?
And number 3 is claim your true identity, right?
Well, that's what I was getting at. So we see ourselves with a certain perspective, with the human race consciousness, and we're trying to get to the higher consciousness. What I knew was divine consciousness. You say those words, divine consciousness, and your identity, what you're identifying with all these, for me, 53 years, has got to go. It just put it aside. Yeah, you're still going to wash dishes, right? But what you're identifying with needs to change. And once you step into those larger shoes, as I did, it was kind of a 2-step process for me. I didn't know anything about chakras. I didn't know anything about energy centers, but higher consciousness led me to this. I was so excited because I was going to be able to read the Bible, right? It was a Bible interpretation. And I said, oh, cool. And all it did was drill into my head the New Testament interpretation from Regina Dawn Akers. And it goes very deep. It took me only 3 months to identify with the divine peace and love of God that I am. And boom, my heart chakra, not even knowing anything about heart chakras, must have opened up, because the 20 years of heart palpitations that I had been experiencing, because I was in the world, right? Not knowing anything about an inner world. And that's the higher self trying to get a hold of you, right? And not paying any attention to any of that. They dissipated very quickly, and the heart chakra opened up. I know that it did, because it wasn't too long before I started feeling pressure up top of my head. As my meditations continued, back to James Porter Mills, his vibrations were very high. Notice the words I'm using when I open up the heart chakra, with divine peace and divine love. And I'm sorry, I use this book pointing to James Porter Mills. Mm-hmm. I don't have Mind Silence Partner in hard copy. I've only ever used the online version. But I mean, just read that word right there, illumination. He just the words he were using, just the higher vibrations, and saying these things out loud, or even contemplating those words by myself staring at a wall, omniscience and eternal life. And he would go and say, we would all do ourselves a world of good if you would just contemplate on infinite spirit. And you are infinite spirit of eternal life. I am. He would use the I am statement of being all the time, not you are. In that book, he was I am. So I'm reading I am constantly. I am infinite spirit of eternal life. And those vibrations, what I call the wave mechanics, those wave mechanics coming into my aura, right, and rising up into the upper part of my body with nowhere to go because pineal gland is not open. And this I learned later. But what shot through my head, or what was rising up, was not going to go anywhere until that pineal gland was open. So I was identifying with my true nature, divine peace and love, higher divine peace and love, infinite and eternal nature, omniscient, infinite and eternal, omnipotence was a big word too, all powerful, all knowing, eternal. And boy, it didn't take too long before the pressure was rising so much, and then the experience happened. So yes, identity, but you set your small self aside. And I know I'm not back there either. I'm my name is Lisa. I am divine love. I am infinite spirit of eternal life. My name is Lisa. I am the spirit of health. I don't feel well today, but I am the spirit of health. So when the consciousness has been reformed, if you will, reconstructed, the I am becomes extremely important. It is what you are. And so we need to be, I don't have to be careful with my words anymore. It just flows out.
Right.
It flows out like it should.
That's
proper alignment.
Isn't that a call for all of us to be careful with our words, because our words have power and they matter.
Yeah.
I mean, what you're saying is these words have incredible power for good, to claim your identity, to claim yourself as a divine being of love and light, to claim inner illumination. I am, divine light. I am divine love. I mean,
illuminating wisdom. I am illuminating wisdom and righteousness. I am eternal God consciousness.
Right. This body maybe doesn't feel well today. That's okay.
Yes.
Yeah,
that's
okay
right.
To acknowledge
that's
that.
Right.
But
let's speak our truth. Yeah.
Right.
Let's speak our truth. That's, Rick used it's the iceberg thing with the little, what's the tip of it is on the surface of the water, and that's how we perceive ourselves. But we have this big, I'm like, no, don't use pictures, please. I am. That is the most powerful thing that we can speak. It speaks worlds more than a picture of an iceberg. Worlds more. We need to get used to that and claim our true identity, right? And the universe is responding. When you claim your true identity, right? It'll give you everything you ask for. Asking, you shall receive. So you want your divine peace and love? Say that. Say that's what you are.
Beautiful.
Surrender. Okay. Again, you thank you for reading that paragraph, because it is key. Had I not been fully surrendered, it may have turned out differently for me. In other words, it would have taken maybe 10 years, right, for the regeneration to occur. I would have experienced a lot more probably physical malady and who knows what else. There have been, I've worked with people who've had the life energy rising up and have had problems with it. And I say, well, surrender. You are not fully surrendered. It is your life. It is not going to harm you. It may be uncomfortable. I mean, to the point where you're just like, and you may have some experiences along the way that are uncomfortable, but it is your life. And it is working through your whole autonomic nervous system. Is that pretty good? It's working through your whole energetic system, your whole consciousness. Your whole body is consciousness. So it's working through. I mean, I wouldn't have known to not surrender my entire body, mind, organism over to the spirit of life. Why wouldn't I do that? Why wouldn't I do that? Isn't that what we're here for? Is for what are we doing here? If we're not here, right, to be as fully human as we can. And how do we do that? Well, the body, mind, organism, I didn't make it. I thought I did for 53 years. I thought I was responsible for it. And, no, it's life.
Yeah.
It's life. It's life. It was kind of interesting somewhere along the way. And I got very attached to, during the Bliss period, I would allow myself to read a little bit of Ramana's material, not this. This was still a little too heady for me, right? But he has many different pamphlets out, and one of the most glaring statements. Now, I've already had the experience, and I've been to my probably third year of Bliss, right? And somewhere, I think it was in Conscious Immortality, but he says, so he had visitors come, right? And people were documenting for him their questions. And there was a visitor that was just saying, he's like, I cannot surrender. I just cannot surrender myself over to my higher self. And Ramana's response, finally, he says, well, it was never your life to begin with. Now, if you think about that, what he's saying, and I sat with that for over 30 minutes, right? It's not your life to begin with. It's God's, it's Creator's life. Okay, I use the word God. I like the word God. I really do. It works well in prayers. It feels good. I like the word universe, right? Unified field doesn't work real well for me in my prayers, right? But I understand where that's coming from. We're all using terminology that fits a certain environment, but when I'm in prayer and meditation, right? So this, Ramana always used higher self, right? With the capital S, so as to not get tripped up when his message was getting out there beyond Indian culture. I still like the word God, so I'll use it in universe, higher self, interchangeably. But I did not create this body and mind. I did not. That was quite clear to me from the very beginning. When you sit and think about that, and then just turn it over, turn the body, mind, organism over to that which created it, right? So that is we were on surrender, right?
Yeah, and I just want to say I so appreciate all that you've said, and surrender's a hard one for a lot of people, and I will just briefly say in my own story, I was really, really sick with mold poisoning, and one morning I woke up from after a year later. I actually thought I was kind of clean, and it was out of my body, but I had it was on my birthday, and I had another attack of this mold poisoning, and I'm like pretty deflated because it's my birthday. Well, and I texted my friend and meditation teacher, Stephen Altair.
Yeah.
And I was, kind of saying, I can't believe I have it again. And I said, what am I to do? And he said, what are you resisting? And
Love it.
And I sat with those words. I remember staring at the phone going, huh?
Yeah.
And about, I don't know, 5 hours later of contemplating that, it dawned on me. I was like, this is about surrender, isn't it?
Yeah.
And he said, and I wrote that to him, and he said, yes.
Yeah. Nice one, Stephen.
Yeah.
I know you're out there.
Right? And so it's a hard one, but boy, I mean, once I got that, I swore I was going to tattoo the word surrender on my arm so I would never
Yeah,
forget it, because it's that
yeah,
powerful when we get
yeah,
actually, and I love what you said, this is not your life anyway.
yeah,
Right?
yeah,
Or however
yeah.
you said it.
I was repeating the man, but it's true. It is
Mhm.
true. And surrender, and all will be well. It is an art.
It is
Just
an art.
like you,
Yeah.
you know, every time you come back with, there's a situation to surrender, you're like, surrender again. I thought I said
Right.
it.
Really? Again? But when you keep, in my experiences, like I had that one big aha, and all the other surrenders have been much easier because
Good.
it was like I
Mhm.
finally had this felt sense of what that really meant.
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know, and I
yeah.
just love had you said how had there been any resistance from my thinking mind, right? This is not about your thinking mind. It's like the
No,
whole
the
body.
mind has a creator, by the way. Something created the mind. I'll call it omniscience. Surrender it.
Yeah.
It's well worth it. It's well worth it. Now the mind is a tool. I like it. I like it, and it's clear. It's functioning properly as it should, and the perception now of truth in the world I can see clearly now. And the mind, then we pick it up and can put it down and pick it up and put it down. It's not running the show.
Yeah.
Higher consciousnesses. Yeah.
Love
And
it.
the
Okay.
inspirations that I receive come through the heart chakra. You know, when I get inspired to do something, it's like this, and then you engage the mind if you have to, and then go sit under a tree and have a cold beer. You know, that's what I do. So, and
Great.
then
That's really great. So number 5.
yeah, meditate and abide. We'll put those two together because
Yeah.
you know, I say meditate. It's the higher self is going to lead each and every single one of us, as it did with me. Higher consciousness to a path of contemplation. It knew I was not prepared to do any meditative work. That would have been way too difficult for me to slow the mind down, and the fears that were arising, especially, well, let's just say I was still in a state of fear for the most part, as we all know. It's that state of consciousness where you're not consciously aware of your higher self. And after 53 years of having no knowledge of the higher self, right? So, so consciousness leads me through a path of contemplation. It would be different for somebody else wanting to regenerate their consciousness. What sort of path? But I use the term meditate. Okay, contemplation. I don't know. Stare at a wall. That's what I did. Stare at a wall. Yeah, stare at a wall. That's what I was led to do. You're surrendered.
Right.
You're surrendered. Yeah. And then,
And
of
when
course,
you,
abide.
sorry, Lisa.
You just abide. I just wanted to wrap it up with the 6 steps, abiding. And I love that because that is a big one of Ramana's, and abidance is don't, if you're totally surrendered, you're there, the higher self is going to bring to you the materials that you need, not 30 different things.
Yeah.
No, it's going to, and it's going to feel good, and it's going to match up with whatever's going on in your consciousness. It's the higher consciousness wanting to, once again, pour through its own creation and elevate the consciousness and get rid of all the blah, 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 right? All the accumulated stuff. So it is the direct path. It's going to bring you 1, 2, maybe 3 documents. So abiding, I think, is an important piece that that we abide with the spirit. We're abiding with the spirit. This is an inner working. Whatever's going on in the outside world, fine. If you want to go and take a 6-week vacation and start cruising the world, you know, on a sailboat, while you're trying to regenerate your consciousness, I don't think that's a good idea. So we abide and stay inward, have that inward focus. So
Maintain
yeah,
that
those
inward
are the
focus.
steps. Yeah. Yeah.
And that was really Ramana's kind of one of his key pointings was
Yeah.
was
Abide
inquiry and
inward,
abide.
inward,
Yep.
inward, inward. And by the way, the inward focus never goes away.
You always feel that.
Yeah.
What's
Yeah.
it feel
When
like
I
to
was,
you, Lisa?
huh?
Feel like to you? What's your felt experience of that inward focus?
Peace. I call it universal peace. I feel at peace at all times. At all times. I mean, really deep, deep, deep peace. Nothing can harm me.
Yeah.
I know now when you feel the higher consciousness working within you at all times, it's like your best friend. I go within for everything now. Well, why not? In reality, Holly, understand that's where everything is happening for us anyway, each and every single one of us. We're just not aware of it. We're just not aware of it. It's all an inside job. And when you become aware of it and aware of the fact that we are all this one conscious being conscious, and you let that flow through, it lights your fire. It's a really, really peaceful, stable. Abiding in the stability of spirit is the way, the truth, and the life. It is true. So
heaven is within.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. So self-healing real quick. I know we're probably running out of time.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. So that's where I'm headed.
Okay.
I met a gentleman because regeneration kept popping up, and self-healing is a very healing very healing process, regeneration, and came across a gentleman by the name of Ken Graydon, who lives in Western Australia. And in fact, I'll be working with him on Monday, our first session together. And, you know, in terms of regenerating, all kinds of, or regenerating, we'll say, in terms of illness, physical malady, mental maladies, and we can do that because of the omnipresent nature of consciousness. And I'm sure you've talked with energy healers who can heal at a distance. That's what Ken does. He's been doing it for 60 years. I'm like, there are people out there that could do that.
Yeah.
You know, we talk about it a lot, especially here in the Western, you know, in the United States, but they're just doing it because it works. They know and understand their true nature and the nature of consciousness. So I'm excited as all get out to be able to help. There was a woman who saw the back gap who, oh gosh, we're running over, who saw back gap, and she said, please tell Ken, thank you so much. I was going in for a gynecological issue with the C word. I'm not even going to say that word, right? After a session with him, it was gone. No surgery. So, you know, we all have that capability of healing ourselves. And I'm going to learn from one of the masters. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, that's fantastic. And I'll put his name in the show notes too. So
yes, Ken Graydon. Yeah.
Ken Graydon. Okay, wonderful. Yeah, energy healing in a distance. I've been doing it with biofield tuning, and same thing. And just having, you know, wonderful feedback from people all over the world. I had somebody in Afghanistan yesterday.
Really?
Really?
So you're reading their biofield on the screen?
On the tuning forks. Yeah.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, healing and tuning people's auric fields at a distance. Yeah.
Wow. Super. Well, we need to talk a little bit more about that then.
Great. Let's do that. Yeah. Let's do that.
Yeah. And one other thing, I'm going back to Bliss.
Yeah.
I saw your interview with Dawson Church.
Mm-hmm.
I had seen him before elsewhere, but today, as I was poking around on the YouTube channel. So what I mean, you know, I want to have that experience all day long again, and be able to, like Dawson's laugh is just infectious, you know, and to feel that all day long. I mean, I'm very elated all day long regardless, but I can take it higher. I had to come out for 2 years and do all this technical stuff and research, and you know, so I need to get back to bliss. And
Nice.
yeah, yeah.
Your story is so very inspiring. And maybe the last thing I just want to ask, because I'm curious if you've been asked this before. You know, a lot is made of Kundalini awakening, and lots of people experience spiritual awakenings without a so-called Kundalini, you know, experience. And I'm just kind of curious your thoughts on that. And I will just sort of interject that my own, you know, like I haven't had a Kundalini experience like you described. And at the same time, I've followed a path that has some similarities to you, like fervent attention to really wanting to orient my being to my higher consciousness and meditating. And I've had, you know, number of shifts over the last 2 years relative to that. And so
Wonderful.
there's a lot of, there can be a lot of striving. You know, what's beautiful about your story is, in a sense, like the experience just happened, although you were doing all these things, of course, but it was spontaneous, right? And so I see a lot of people trying, and there's this delicate art, right, between like being and doing. And I'm just kind of curious and trying, and I'm kind of curious your response to that.
I didn't, oh gosh, Holly. I think the intention was so passionate. It was unequivocal.
Yeah.
There was no turning back.
Yeah.
I wanted to know God, and I wanted to know God now.
Mm.
So perhaps that's why, not perhaps, let's just, that is why the energy rose. That passion right there, the unequivocal, I want to know God now, was a surrender. Yeah. I was done with the world. I was prepared if it was, there were a couple of nights I laid my head on the pillow. If I do not awake, okay, it's okay. So with that, it's all in the intention. Yeah. And that the rising for me, because after 53 years of having no inner self knowledge, no consciousness of an inner self, it was so explosive. You and Dawson mentioned, you know, at 15, he was learning meditation. So he's, you know, his energies were probably, since meditating at age 15, you know, and understanding the nature of the energy centers and biofields and all of that at such a young age, he's not going to have that kind of explosive experience. Your meditation, his pineal gland was probably fully functioning. And so there's not that explosiveness of the Kundalini. It's always active. That life force, that's another thing that, and I've talked to a couple of the science foundations about this thing about it being dormant in the base of our spine. Maybe we need to take a look at that. It's, to me, it's always active. It is. It's our life force. It's beating our heart. It is. And maybe, hopefully that answers your question a little bit. For each and every single one of it, it's different. It's working its way towards higher consciousness always. If that's what your intention is. If it's steadfast and I don't want to live another day, you know, look out.
Yeah. And what I hear in that beautiful answer from you is fervent attention to this, you know, this goal, and then kind of a deep surrender or trust that, you know, letting go of letting that path unfold. Am I putting words in your mouth?
It actually, what happens when you're totally surrendered is the knowing that comes along every single day that everything is going to be okay. It's a knowing that arises. It's a higher consciousness. Some call it faith, but it's beyond faith. It's a knowing. I always knew, even if I put my head on the pillow and say, okay, if I don't like, I knew I was going to wake up the next day. It's a knowing. It's that it's coming from higher self that is telling the mind body organism that it created that all will be well. Be still, know I am God. It really sinks in, and it's very comforting along the way, no matter how treacherous it might seem at the time. So I say shoot high, surrender, and stick with it, until abide. We'll just say abide. I'll use Ramana's term. I love it. Abide.
You are that aim high. I think that's the perfect place to leave it.
Yeah. It's glorious. Glorious way to live life. It really is. Thanks for letting me share.
It's my great honor to have you on and to hear your words and have you share. And I know that so many people listening will just be truly appreciative for you sharing your very inspiring story and for taking the time to embody, to really reflect back on some of the key points that, about intention and claiming your true identity and surrendering and, meditating and abiding. And by the way, we can get people to update their science to really see that consciousness is really all there is.
Yeah.
I just really fundamentally agree with you. Those are main points. Those are some beautiful.
I mean, they seem so obvious,
Right.
when I was in the midst of it, I had no clue what I was doing. I was just following whatever, I was surrendered and this book, that book, but looking back, right? And it's not like you want to categorize things, but I don't want to categorize things, but it's true. This is what I did, so.
Well, consciousness knew what it was doing, right? I mean,
good point. That is a good point. Thank you. It did know what it was doing. I didn't. I did not. I had no idea where it was going to go. And to lead up to this experience, I had no idea.
Every single one of us has within us that same consciousness, which means
if it can happen to one, right. If it can happen to one, James Porter Mills says that in his book. All it takes is one.
Happen to anybody listening, right?
Right.
Update your science, set your intention, claim your identity, surrender, meditate, and abide. Follow those principles, and this too shall be yours.
Yeah, you'll find your master.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you.
I'm sorry we went over so much, but I get so excited about it. I'm sorry.
No apologies. I wasn't going to stop you because I was enjoying listening to you too much.
Okay.